Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going back pretty far, actually, to 1996. We're digging into the Coen Brothers film Fargo.
Yeah, it's one of those films that just, sticks around.
Yeah.
We got interested after seeing some online discussion revisiting it. Plus, we found some great articles looking back.
Right. So whether you've seen Fargo a dozen times, or maybe you're just kind of curious what all the fuss is about, we're aiming to go a bit deeper today.
Definitely. Beyond just, like, the famous scenes. We want to unpack how it was made, the Coen's intentions, why it still feels so relevant. We've pulled together a bunch of different takes on it.
And yeah, it really started with this interesting point someone raised online. I think it was a Reddit user, Milkelnick. They questioned whether Fargo should even be called a cult classic.
Yeah, the cult classic debate.
Exactly. It makes you think, right? I mean, a movie that got rave reviews, won Oscars, made money, even spawned a hit TV show. Is that really cult?
That was Milkelnick's whole point. They were saying, look, the critical acclaim, the Best Actress Oscar for Frances McDormand, Best Original Screenplay for the Coens.
Right, the box office success, too.
And in the TV series.
Yeah.
It all points towards it just being, well, a classic, period. Not really cult.
Yeah.
What's your gut reaction to that?
Well, it immediately turned into, classic Reddit.
Yeah.
Someone else, David St. Hovens, I think, joked about how on the movie subreddit, you almost have to use certain words for older films.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like underrated or cult classic or still holds up or unappreciated. It's kind of funny looking at how we frame these discussions online.
It is, yeah. Like, there were required buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
And other people jumped in suggesting Coen of films that maybe fit the cult label better.
The Big Lebowski came up, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. People mentioned the midnight screenings, the fan festivals, the whole ethos around the dude, as one person put it.
Yeah, Lebowski Fest and all that.
Right. And Blood Simple, their first film, was also thrown out there as maybe more of a true cult film.
But then another user, Cinema Freak, had a really good point. They suggested maybe that cult classic idea is more of a UK thing, referencing the article that sparked the thread.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were arguing that in the US, Fargo was actually a pretty big independent hit. It topped critics' lists, won those big Oscars.
So mainstream success, essentially, not niche.
Exactly. Their point was maybe calling it cult overlooks how big it actually was stateside. It shows how reception can vary geographically.
Which is a good segue into looking at the film's beginnings. Because Fargo really was a pivotal film for the Coens.
Yeah, it was their fifth one, right. And it came after the Hudsucker Proxy, which hadn't done too well financially.
Correct. And it's pretty wild to hear that someone close to them, William Preston Robertson, apparently read the Fargo script and thought it was just bizarre.
Bizarre? How so?
He apparently called it the weirdest, most bizarre, most inaccessible script they'd written. Even worried it might be like career suicide.
Wow. Career suicide.
For Fargo. That's hard to imagine now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But it just shows you. Sometimes the most unique stuff feels risky at first.
Yeah, totally. And then, of course, it blew up critically, commercially. It was the film that really introduced the Coen style to, like, mainstream America. That initial doubt just adds to the story, I think.
It really does. Now, thinking about where the idea came from, the Coens have mentioned, and it was in the press kit too, that the basic setup was inspired by a real event.
Oh, yeah. Like the kidnapping plot.
Sort of the general structure, yeah. Something that happened in Minnesota back in 1987. But, and this is key, they stress the details, the characters. That was all them. All fictional.
So not a documentary. They weren't, like, interviewing people involved or anything.
No, no interest in that. They just took that initial spark, that premise, and used it as a launch pad for their own story.
Which brings us to the title, Fargo. Because most of it happens in Brainerd, Minnesota, right? Not Fargo, North Dakota.
Exactly. People wonder about that. But the Coens' explanation is pretty simple.
What did they say?
They just liked the sound of the word Fargo. Thought it was more evocative than Brainerd.
Ah, really? That's it?
Apparently so. They shot down theories about it being a Western reference, like Wells Fargo or anything. Just like the sound. Sometimes it's that simple.
Fair enough. And stylistically, this was a shift for them too, wasn't it? Away from something like Blood Simple.
Yeah, very much so. They described Blood Simple as more flamboyant melodrama. With Fargo, they wanted something much drier, more observational.
Like the camera's just watching things unfold?
Exactly. A detached witness. And the structure reflects that too. It allows for these little detours, these side moments. Maybe that true story angle gave them license for that.
And holding back Marge Gunderson's entrance, Frances McDormand.
Until quite a way into the film.
Yeah, that was deliberate. They said it was a signal right away that this isn't your standard genre movie. It messes with your expectations.
Keeps you guessing.
For sure. And they've also talked about wanting to explore Minnesota, their home state, and this recurring interest they have in kidnapping plots. But not with typical movie criminals.
Right. They wanted characters who felt more real, flawed. They called Jerry Lundegaard, William H. Macy's character, an amateur criminal.
It fits perfectly. He's so out of his depth.
Completely. Which leads into that setting in Minnesota. You said it feels like a character itself.
It really does. The Coens said the place was a huge inspiration, and you feel it everywhere the way people talk, that sense of, like, cold emptiness sometimes.
Yeah, atmosphere. And it lets them play with that whole Minnesota nice idea.
Oh, yeah, that politeness, that sort of surface-level pleasantness.
Right up against this incredibly dark, violent story. It creates this amazing tension. It's funny, but also deeply unsettling. Makes you wonder what's really going on underneath.
And Marge Gunderson is right in the middle of that contrast. Frances McDormand's performance. It's just iconic.
She's seen as the film's moral center, right? The emotional core.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see why.
Yeah, the Coens described her performance as really sincere and direct.
Which is important, because it stops her from being just a caricature. Even with the accent and everything, she feels grounded, real.
Definitely. Then you've got Jerry, William H. Macy, that Reddit comment about him being like a human domino effect.
That's a great description. One bad decision just triggers everything else, spiraling completely out of control.
And the Coens saw him as this pathetic loser, right? Someone who just couldn't see the consequences coming.
Yeah, no foresight at all. And Macy apparently fought really hard for that part. He must have really understood that mix of desperation and, frankly, incompetence.
You can see why. And what about Marge and her husband, Norm? John Carroll Lynch. Their scenes are so quiet.
They are, aren't they? The Coens talked about that, how their simple, kind of understated interactions were interesting. Lynch's sort of impassive expression, they called it.
It feels very true to that sort of regional personality, maybe, that undemonstrative way of being.
I think so. And their relationship, it's like an anchor, isn't it? A bit of simple warmth amidst all the greed and violence.
Yeah, a bit of normal life.
Because the Coens also pointed out that theme of money. They said basically all the characters are obsessed with money in some way.
And it drives them to do these crazy things.
Exactly. Irrational, destructive things.
And back to that, based on a true story opening, it's such a Coen thing to do.
Yeah.
Playful.
Totally. They admitted it gave them freedom, like introducing Marge late or having that weird scene with Mike Yanagita.
Oh, yeah, that scene is so awkward and strange.
Right. The true story claim kind of lets them get away with those digressions. It sets a tone, makes you lean in, maybe question what's real and what's not.
It definitely changes how you watch it if you think it actually happened like that.
For sure. And part of that playing with expectations is how they portray the criminals, Carl and Gere, Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare.
They're not slick masterminds, are they?
Not even close. They're inept, they bicker, they make terrible mistakes, which the Coens felt was more realistic. They believed real criminals are often just not very good at it.
Yeah, kind of fumbling, almost. It's darkly funny.
Which brings us to that blend, that tightrope walk between dark comedy and, like, genuine thriller suspense.
How did they manage that? Because it could easily go wrong.
Well, the Coens said they believe comedy is just part of life, even the dark parts. And crucially, they didn't shoot it like a comedy.
Ah, okay, so they played it straight.
Yeah, sincerely, directly, even the absurd stuff. And that's why the humor lands, because it feels like it arises naturally from the characters and the situations, however bizarre.
That makes sense. And the look of the film is so key to that tone, too. Roger Deakins' cinematography.
Oh, absolutely essential. Someone called it a masterclass in restraint, which feels right.
Yeah, he used that landscape, didn't he? The snow, the flatness.
Used it brilliantly to reflect the characters' coldness, their detachment, maybe a kind of moral emptiness, those huge white snowy vistas.
Yeah.
It's like nature just doesn't care about their little schemes.
And the camera work itself is often quite still, isn't it? Not flashy.
Very deliberate. Lots of stillness or very purposeful moves, like tracking shots, slow zooms. But then you get that contrast, like the scene where Jerry's scraping the ice off the windshield.
Right. It's framed so tightly. Feels really claustrophobic.
Exactly. It mirrors his panic, trapped inside, while outside is just this vast, indifferent cold. It's great visual storytelling.
And the way shots are composed, too, using empty space.
Yeah, negative space. It makes the characters seem small, isolated against the landscape. Or the opposite, the symmetry in shots of Marge and Norm, suggesting their balance, their connection.
It's really thoughtful stuff. And the lighting.
Very naturalistic. You get that cold, almost harsh light outdoors in the snow.
Yeah, very bleak sometimes.
And then contrasted with the interiors, which are often warmer, dimmer, especially Marge and Norm's house. It gives you these little pockets of warmth.
A visual relief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Deakins used different lenses very effectively, too. Wide angles to emphasize the vastness, make characters seem lost. And then sometimes telephoto lenses that compress the space make things feel more trapped or tense. And even just how the actors are placed in the frame, the blocking, it tells you about the power dynamics without a word.
And the colors. Or lack thereof, almost. So much white and gray.
Yeah, a very muted palette reflecting the environment, which makes those occasional flashes of color like the red blood on the snow so much more shocking and memorable.
It really jumps out.
Yeah. All these choices, shooting on 35mm film, using natural light where possible, the editing style credited to Roderick James, which is actually the Coens themselves.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's their editing pseudonym. It all creates this really grounded, authentic feel. Plus the sound design, that constant wind, the crunch of snow.
Yeah.
It just pulls you right into that world.
So given all that, it's really no wonder it was such a critical hit.
Not at all. Siskel and Ebert calling it the best film of '96, that's huge. And getting into the National Film Registry means it's considered culturally significant, preserved for all time.
And Joel Coen won directing awards too, right? BAFTA, Cannes.
Yep. Major recognition. Critics just seem to respond incredibly strongly to that unique tone, the performances, the whole package.
And its influence goes way beyond awards, doesn't it? I mean, the FX show.
Huge. The TV show has kept that Fargo world going, exploring similar themes and that specific tone. It's quite a legacy.
And just things like Minnesota Nice entering the language, or lines from the movie people still quote.
Oh, yeah, you betcha.
Exactly. It really seeped into pop culture.
It definitely cemented the Coens as this major, distinct voice in filmmaking.
And it's interesting to think about it in the context of 90s indie film, like alongside Wes Anderson's Bottle Rocket, which came out around the same time.
How so? What's the connection?
Well, some see them both as part of this moment of, like, peak quirkiness, this fascination with oddball characters, people on the margins.
Oh, okay.
And especially inept criminals. Both films kind of subvert that whole master criminal trope we see in lots of movies.
That's a really interesting parallel. Both films feature criminals who are just not very good at crime.
Right. And both also played with that based on a true story idea, even if it was stretched or made up.
Oh, yeah. Bottle Rocket, too.
Apparently, the rooftop heist scene was loosely inspired by a real, equally clumsy attempt Anderson and Owen Wilson were involved in or knew about. So yeah, both films kind of teasing the audience with that claim.
Huh. A playful approach to truth in storytelling.
Yeah. And despite all the violence in Fargo, you often hear it called one of the Coens' most empathetic films.
Largely because of Marge, right?
I think so. She provides such a strong moral and emotional anchor. Even though some Minnesotans initially bristled at the portrayal, the feeling seems to be the humor comes from affection, you know. Shrewd observation and cockeyed affection, as someone put it.
She brings a humanity that balances out the absurdity and the darkness.
Absolutely. And it's just a film that holds up, isn't it? People rewatch it and still find new things, new details to appreciate.
Definitely rewards repeat viewings.
So wrapping this up, it's clear Fargo had this incredible trajectory. From being seen as this potentially weird, risky project
to becoming this huge, critical, and commercial success. A real touchstone film.
Yeah, that unique mix of dark humor, crime, those unforgettable characters, Minnesota itself, and just that incredible visual style from Deakins. It all comes together.
And going back to that Reddit thread, maybe cult classic isn't quite the right label, given its success and influence.
Probably not. But whether you call it cult or just classic, its status seems pretty undeniable. It's a landmark of independent film, for sure.
Absolutely. A true classic.
So maybe a final thought to leave folks with. Think about how Fargo shows us these ordinary people getting tangled up in these extraordinary, often violent, and frankly absurd situations. What does that say about, I don't know, human nature?
Yeah, about the potential for darkness or chaos lurking just beneath the surface, even in places that seem totally normal and, well, nice.
Exactly. Something to chew on. Maybe go back and watch Fargo again, or check out the TV show, keeping some of this in mind. See what else jumps out at you.